Okay, okay. Let me know. All right. How's it going, y'all? Thank y'all for coming. I appreciate it. My name is Dario Dominguez. I am the extension agent for Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service for the Expanded Food and Nutrition Education Program here in Bexar County. It's a lot of words, right? But basically what we are is we are part of A&M Systems. And what we do is provide community education around agriculture. And so different agents have different program areas. Mine is nutrition. And so it does tie in. There's a few things here and there in terms of, being aware of where your food's coming from. I think might be a huge theme of today, which is what you definitely want to do because it's so important to know where your food is coming from, how it's being handled, because ultimately it goes into us, right? And so today's presentation is about fad diets. We're going to talk a little bit about specific fad diets, kind of what does it mean, how do we find them? We're going to highlight some of the main ones y'all have likely heard about. Maybe you know a lot about it, maybe you don't know too much about it. And then we're going to be getting into what are actual recommended diets in the sense of what is good for us, because so many times there's so much information out there. So get this going. Nope. There we go. All right, so fad diets come from everywhere, right? You see them on TV. For those of us that listen to radio, you hear them on the radio. I think the biggest one is likely the online, right? Social media. And there are just any number out there, right? Any number of people trying to either tell you what's the best approach, what is going to be healthy. Some of them trying to sell you various supplements, various dieting strategies, various plans. And so when y'all think about fad diets, what kind of pops in your mind when you hear those words? What do y'all think? Like if you can just say, I think of this one. What not to eat, sure, right? Quick fixes, of course. There's so many levels to it, and especially these days where everything has gotten muddy. It's very hard to kind of see what it is we're supposed to be doing, and also what is the goal? Because you're gonna hear me talk about goals a lot because what a lot of fad diets do, the goal is focused on weight loss, not necessarily improved health. And it can vary, right? Because a lot of these diets we're going to be talking about today can do a variety of things. There's some good things about them. There's some maybe less good things about them. But ultimately, it's up for y'all to decide what's going to be working best for you, right? Because we all have personal agency. We all need to be aware of what we want to do. So, of course, what is a fad diet? A diet promising any kind of weight loss without kind of any really other health advantage or scientific evidence. It's characterized as stylish, and it promises dramatic results, right? And usually a set amount of time. And so when we're thinking about these, a bunch of red flags that can kind of come up are you can really sum it up in this first one. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. A lot of fad diets are very restrictive, where you're going to be cutting down multiple food groups. You're going to be cutting out certain kinds of foods, types of energy sources. It's going to recommend using single foods in high quantities. It also eliminates, like I said, entire food groups such as grains or dairy, promises a quick and easy weight loss with no effort in a certain amount of time, claims there's no need for physical activity. And I didn't put exercise in there because when people hear exercise, they tend to clinch, right? Don't make me do it. I don't want to do it. I don't want to, go on a treadmill. Don't make me do it. And so when I say physical activity, I just mean moving your body, moving as much of your body as much as you can. That lunch nature walk, perfect. That's physical activity, right? And so if there are diets that are saying, okay, weight loss without it, it's usually not super sustainable. And a lot of it is going to be anecdotal, right? I heard my friend say this. I saw these pictures, which can show different results, but it's not always the best kind of sign of if is it effective or not for everybody, right? Because what's going to work for one of us isn't going to work for all of us. And so there's a ton of categories of fad diets, right? So these are the major ones: low carb, unprocessed, liquid-based, restrictive, cleanse and detox, supplement-based, and then healthy lifestyle. To go through, we could spend hours talking about any one of these. So we're just going to highlight some of the major ones, like I mentioned. And the first one is likely one that y'all likely all heard of some form or fashion, is low carbohydrate. And so what it does is it limits carbohydrates while emphasizing foods higher in protein and fat. It varies in restrictions as well as types and amounts of carbohydrates you can eat. And the main goal is weight loss. So for perspective, typically in your typical diet, right, our energy sources, 60% of it is kind of the recommendation for carbohydrates. When you have a low carbohydrate diet, some of those can go as low as 20, some of those can go as low as 10%, which is a huge shift, which means you're going to get maybe ranging 60% to 80% of fats, which has its own set of issues. So to go over some pros and cons, a pro, right? Because I don't want to say just like, okay, it's all bad, right? Pro, it encourages more non-starchy vegetable intake. So if y'all know what starch vegetables are, right? Those are the ones that are high in calories, right? Glucose. They serve their purpose, but we need variety, right? We're always going to encourage us eating a variety of fruits and vegetables. It discourages consumption of added sugars, which aligns with the dietary guidelines, right? Because I love my sweets just like anybody else. If I go to the store and I see something, I always look at the facts label and I say, oh man, this got more sugar in it than I need in a day. I may still eat it, but that's okay, because we want to be aware of it, right? That's the big thing, is we don't want to be not depriving ourselves, but moderation is going to be a big factor. Cons, exceeds the recommendations for dietary fat and protein, which can put us at risk for cardiovascular disease, right? So with that balancing out, right? Again, it can lead to high cholesterol, arterial issues. It also falls short on carbohydrate recommendations, specifically lacks grains and fruit, right? I love fruit. That's kind of my go-to. I eat plenty of fruit each day. And then sudden weight loss is usually due to water weight. It's not always associated with that fat loss, which is kind of what a lot of these diets are kind of promising. It's like, okay, you're going to lose weight. And again, if it's just water weight, it's going to balance out at some point. A really popular low carbohydrate diet, ketogenic diet, probably a bit more popular about 5 or 6 years ago. I think it's kind of been switching around. But this is a very strict low carbohydrate diet. The goal is to force the body to burn fat rather than carbohydrates. And so the way that works is that if you deprive your body of enough carbohydrates, right, these are usually around 10% or less, it forces your body from using carbs or glucose as its main energy to switching it to fats. And so that's where that fat loss kind of comes into. And that is when your body is doing that process, it's called ketosis. Now, you can't just feel it. Anecdotally, you will hear people say, oh, I can feel it. You can feel it. But there's no really way to prove it. And mileage is going to vary from person to person. So you do have to use ketone urine strips to tell if you're actually in ketosis. And there can be user error with those. So it's not always going to be, 100% correct. And of course, this really originated in the 1920s to treat epilepsy. It's really more of a modern shift to try to find it for weight loss and use it for weight loss. And the big things we always get kind of asked is keto safe, right? Should I be doing it? Keto in and of itself can result in weight loss. However, long-term usage, right, can result in kidney stones, liver disease, various vitamin mineral deficiencies, because we are cutting off a lot of those carbohydrates. We're not just cutting off, when people think carbs, a lot of people tend to think of like bread. I'm cutting out tortillas, I'm cutting out bread. But when you're on these diets and you're following them as recommended, you're going to wind up losing quite a bit of that. And also, of course, cardiovascular health. The research in terms of increased fatty diets resulting in increased risk of cardiovascular disease is there, right? It's not necessarily there in terms of keto. There is limited research in the sphere of what it does for weight loss, but there's a lot of research that's going to show when you start adding in higher fat amounts into your diet that you're going to increase these other risks. And that's just kind of, again, having that saturated fat in the diet. And it can be kind of like a lifestyle change versus a trend. People kind of go back and forth between the two. And again, if you're having those epileptic seizures, then this might be the way to go. But that needs to come from a licensed medical professional or a registered dietitian. It's nothing that you want to kind of make your own call on, especially if you are predisposed to any of those other chronic diseases, or you have a chronic disease that you're already going through. Because again, this will vary from person to person. Unprocessed diet, right? Eliminates foods that require processing. The purpose is to stay away from preservatives, fast food type foods, things that have, quote unquote, caused the obesity epidemic here in the US. And of course, foods to avoid are going to be mostly grain and dairy products and any food products containing preservatives. And so there's a variety of reasons why preservatives are used in food. Some of them, of course, the big reasons is to increase shelf life, right? And so there are some definite hallmarks of some grains of truth in following an unprocessed diet, right? Pros: encourages more fruits and vegetables. Always a good thing. I love my fruits. I love my vegetables. When I saw the lunch options, I grabbed the salad. So I was like, I'm a big person of like, keep it simple. If it's there, I'm going to just do it. Just do it for my own good, right? Doesn't happen every day, but I try to make that happen most days. Many foods included are going to be high in vitamins and minerals and fiber because, again, you're going for those whole foods, which is always going to be a good move, right? Whole fruits, whole vegetables, lean proteins. It discourages the consumption of added sugar and salt, which also aligns with the dietary guidelines. Cons: it does exclude whole grains and most dairy foods. And so when we think about this, we think about like paleo would kind of fall in this category, right? Where you're eating what your ancestors eat, which there are some grains of truth in there, but also our ancestors' average age of life expectancy was like 35. So there's got to be some balance to it. Difficult to follow in a social setting. It is tough, right? When we're trying to live a certain lifestyle and we're out and about in society doesn't always go with the way we want to do it. Friends, family are also included in that. So when you're trying to find these different, let's say you're going out to eat and you're trying to find what's going to match up with you, it can make it more difficult. Also, it can be expensive, right? Because ultimately, when you are looking for less processed food, which can be a good thing, there's certain levels to it in unprocessed diet because it will vary from the diet to diet, right? Because in paleo, can't have dairy, can't have bread, can't have flour really, because it didn't exist, doesn't count. And so you have to go out of your way to find these things that are going to fit in that diet. Any questions so far, by the way? All right. Intermittent fasting. This is probably, I wouldn't say it's like the most current one. There's things kind of coming down the pipelines, but intermittent fasting is a big one. So it's any eating pattern where you're going to be basically cutting off eating at a certain window, right? These are some of the popular forms: 16-8, which is where you do not eat for 16 hours and then you would eat for 8 hours. You have eat, stop, eat, which is a little bit more general, where you could just kind of pick a couple days, not eat for 24 hours, and then you would eat those other days. And then the 5-2 diet, which is where you would go eat 5 days regularly, 2 days fasting, non-consecutive, so they can't be back to back. But on those days, you are allowed to eat up to 500 calories. And so generally, these can result in weight loss. All of these can, right? If the goal is weight loss, these can do them, right? But remember, we got to keep the whole perspective. That's just one category of health. And again, a lot of the weight loss for this is attributed to just not eating as much as we do. Because if you're just cutting off meals, yeah, we're cutting out calories, right? We're gonna lose weight. There are some signs that there are hormone level changes, which can be attributed to fasting, but more research is needed. Technically, we all fast at some point. When we sleep, people kind of forget that. So if you're like me, I go to bed super early. I go to bed at like 9. And I wake up super early too. So that's the other thing. I wake up around like 5. Today was 4:30. I was like, got to seize the day. So for me, that is a long fasting period. And so there are signs that like I said, it's all still pretty preliminary, but that there isn't a huge amount of change hormonally for people who are getting, a regular sleep fast versus people who are fasting through any of the number of these methods. So to kind of sum up these fad diets, right? Many miss out on key food groups and nutrients. There is a yo-yo effect because these are all require some kind of restriction, right? It's hard to sustain long term. And of course, if you do sustain them long term, you may have some of those more serious health risks, right? The longer you keep up that high fat, high protein diet, the more increased risks of chronic diseases you'll be at. They do lack scientific evidence, especially long-term studies. However, they can kickstart healthy eating habits and weight loss, which sometimes that's what we need because we're human, right? I'm not here to, tell anyone, okay, do this or don't do this. And again, I'm always going to refer you guys back to medical professionals to say, okay, what is going to work best for me? Because again, there's a lot of good habits in there mixed in with those risks, right? But again, it's going to vary from person to person. We don't want to go anecdotally, right? We don't want to be that person, it says, okay, I know I'm going to start, smoking and drinking every day because I knew a guy, he lived to 100. And of course, you hear the opposite. I knew a marathon runner, had a heart attack at 30 and dropped dead on the finish line, right? Those are outliers. We can't use those as our basis, right? So what diets are okay, right? Because that's usually what kind of brings up. So there are approved diets by the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics that are up to the standard according to the dietary guidelines for Americans. And these are all based on scientific research. They're safe and there are benefits to them. And so these are, I just kind of pulled 4 that I think are widely either heard of or accepted. The DASH diet, Mediterranean, healthy vegetarian, and the MyPlate. And so there are going to be very common themes in all of these. The first one we're going to talk about is the DASH diet. So it's flexible and balanced eating plan for heart health. Of course, eating vegetables, fruits, and whole grains. Include fat-free or low-fat dairy, fish, poultry, beans, nuts, vegetable oils, limited foods and saturated fats, sodium, and added sugar. And this is the goal for your sodium level per day. This is what a recommended amount for a person is about, really the high end is 2,300 milligrams, which is about, I'm blanking on the exact number. It's either a teaspoon or a quarter teaspoon. That's kind of like it for the day. But in our foods, right, there's a lot of salt out there. When you go, you read that nutrition facts label, there is salt in most foods. So when you're having these risks of hypertension, this diet can be very good because it's going to keep you, it still lets you have this variety, not super restrictive, and you're going to get the benefits, which is going to be lowering your blood pressure and your LDL cholesterol. Fun fact, I always say this because I think it's always useful. LDL is the bad cholesterol, unhealthy. HDL is a healthy. The way I always tell people, LDL, L is lethal, H is healthy. Super easy way to remember it. Mediterranean, this is always usually at the top of the list for a lot of people when they're recommending diets. Emphasis on fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, and nuts. It focuses on healthy fats, such as omega-3 fatty acids. The benefits, of course, are it's going to reduce the risk of heart disease associated with a decrease in LDL cholesterol, which again is the bad cholesterol. But you see the common theme between the two, right? Eating those whole fruits, eating these variety of sources, these lean proteins, right? Similar to the other ones, right? When we're thinking back to the fad diets, these themes, the benefits are there, right? But this gives us a little bit more flexibility, a little bit more leeway, right? Not as restrictive. Because ultimately, what we've seen in our studies, right, is that establishing those healthy behaviors is so critical, right? It's not just a switch. Some people are like that. I am not. It's taken me quite a long time to figure out a good balance for myself, right? Between physical activity, healthy eating, eating variety. I have a birthday. I like cake, but there's balance to it. And that's what we always have to remember. Healthy vegetarian dietary pattern, right? Great option. Does not include meats, poultry, or seafood. Can include dairy or eggs, right? There's variety in those. Plant-based protein options. And of course, you can actually look at this in the dietary guidelines for Americans. It is broken down in different subcategories, and you can find the different calorie recommendations. Great. Because again, number one theme, you'll probably hear this all day, increasing our plants, right? So important for all of us. Finding these good sources. And of course, the USDA MyPlate, this is, for those of you, if you've never seen this before, this is the new food pyramid. If you grew up with food pyramid like I did, you had like desserts at the top, grains at the bottom, but good? Okay. And this is the new one, which the stance of this is trying to get that variety, right? Having fruits, vegetables, grains, protein, and dairy. Different serving size. And of course, all these diets are going to vary calorically based on individual needs, right? Because what I would need may not be the same what y'all would need, right? And that can vary from for a variety of reasons, right? Physical activity level, height, weight, gender, lifestyle. So many different factors that play into that. But this is always going to focus on a variety. It starts with small changes to help build healthier eating styles. And so I'm a big proponent of that. I always tell people, if you are trying to have a healthier diet, find those realistic behaviors, start small, right? If you're drinking 5 sodas a day and you're cutting to 4, take the win. Because so many times in life, we're not able to, right? Because if we don't take the win for ourselves, who's going to do it, right? So it all starts about finding those small things and working your way up, because that's really what the research shows is going to make more lasting effects through our lifespan, really. So the main thing, again, I want to leave you at is use an eating approach that works for you and is sustainable to you, right? Because that's really what I've been kind of saying the entire time. These fad diets, they can have those health benefits, but what is your goal, right? We really, whenever we're talking about what we're eating, what we're putting in our body, we want to be aware of what is our overall goal in our healthy lifestyle, right? We have lots of research studies. One of our PhDs has research on motivation for physical activity, and it's wild how much it varies. And I'm going to kind of cherry pick some. So 18 to 20, those kind of younger people, it's about looking good, right? Being attractive. 20 to 30, about the same, but then it starts changing around 30 to 40. Maybe they have some kids. Maybe the motivation for being physically active and being healthy is now to be, a role model. Maybe it's about making sure you have that long lifespan to be with your kids. Let's say you get a bit older, right? 50, 60 plus. It's about longevity, right? What am I doing that I can make sure I'm still able to get up, have my independence like we all like to have, right? Because I know it gets tricky for our seniors, right? You get up there, it just doesn't work the same. And so they need a whole other plan compared to what we need. And so that's mainly just to kind of send that same message home, is that we're all different. We're all going to need different things. And that I'm not here to, kind of put any kind of specific bias on anything, but just give you the best information that I have in terms of, what makes a balanced diet or a healthy diet. Because ultimately we're all human, right? Like I've told you guys, I wouldn't call it guilty food, but my go-to food, comfort food, I love pizza. Doesn't matter if it's frozen, doesn't matter if it's like super nice, I'll eat it. I do not discriminate against pizza. I'm just like, no, I'll take it. And so to me, I keep a balance to it though, right? I don't have pizza for every lunch and meal, but when I see it, I'm probably gonna eat it. But I make sure that I'm living my lifestyle in the other days of the week, the other meals, to make sure that this isn't going to have a long-term effect on me. So with that, feel free to follow us on social media. This is our website. We have a variety of programs. I'm one of several. We have one, of course, about gardening. One of the more niche ones, I always say it because it sounds really interesting, is beekeeping. We have one of the state's best entomologists right here in our backyard. And we're always posting our different events here on our website. And of course, social media is AgriLife Bexar County and Texas FNEP. But does anyone have any questions related to anything we talked about today, or really anything nutrition? My main focus is nutrition and food safety, which I'm a big proponent of food safety. A lot of different things that we got to do to make sure our food's safe. But I saw your hand up right here. Mhm. Mhm. Sure. And that's a great question. It can be it varies, truthfully. Um, my usual approach when I hear someone is, following a fad diet, or maybe they're doing something that is less healthy. I come from the approach of, what is the overall effect that's having on them right now? Is it causing them? Because sometimes what happens in this is some people personalities need that, right? They need to be all in. I like to use uh whenever like new health trends come up, someone will say like, and you all hear this, right? Avocado is good for you. Someone will go out and be like, I'm gonna eat avocado for every meal of the day because someone told me it was healthy. I try to come with the approach of, are they still healthy? And the idea of, I'm a huge proponent of blood work, where, which I've been told, but I can't go show my blood work to people. And I was like, you can talk about it, how are their blood levels looking? Because also they may be following this fad diet pretty religiously. Um, and it can be difficult if maybe they are having negative health consequences. But if you provide that safe kind of open space for them to have that discussion, because when you kind of put it right in front of people, it can be tough, right? And that's even for people who want to hear it too. So I think kind of coming from the approach of just saying, hey, I've kind of heard of these things. Are you seeing any of these things? Or, really trying not to kind of be too in their face about it, I think is usually a pretty good approach, is putting the information out there, seeing how, let them draw their own conclusions. Because sometimes, at the end of the day, it may not work. And that's something that we have to kind of learn to accept, is that not everyone's going to be receptive of the message. And that's okay in certain areas, right? Because it can vary. Because I'm going to use my dad. I'm going to pick on him as an example. The man loves his hot dogs, loves them. Could eat them breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Sometimes has. And so I often try to kind of show him, hey, maybe let's vary it up, and he's kind of doing it, but it can vary, truthfully. But it's a good question. And it is a big, I wouldn't say it's like issue, but you're gonna talk to him. Yeah. Any other questions? Sure. Mhm.
Where people can buy these smoothies that were like this is a certain brand name.
Right.
So people buy them. I don't know like stop into like reputable communities that have things. I guess not necessarily brainwash, but like encouraged to be focus on this versus the food versus or I do like Texas, I realize too many things. But it's just talking to like reputable.
I think for us, we always try to keep um, not ideas, but cultural norms in the forefront. Because, when you're dealing with any community, right? If I, which I love my Mexican food. I love my Tex-Mex. I love tacos, the whole thing, right? But if I march, into my family gathering, right, and say, everyone's got to start eating hummus, right? They're like, I don't eat hummus, it doesn't always work that way. And so I think, again, having that kind of light touch, and then trying to provide that information, depending on if they're seeking it out. Because if they are seeking out, you want to capture that, right? If y'all are here today for this whole thing, not even exclusively health, but y'all are here today to learn more about, urban agriculture and what it can do. So when you find people are seeking that information, it's really important to kind of tap into that. And when I converse about these, because I try to keep it casual, I think the more formal things become, the more hesitant and pulled back people can kind of feel. And so when I think, when people are kind of doing that, because that's very common, kind of right. And even then it may not even be a fix, right? Because sometimes when people are having supplements, they may not need those. I think a big one, I'm gonna pick on caffeine a little bit, right? So we need certain amounts of caffeine, but people like to take it to the extreme. Like I need 300 milligrams in every single drink, which is a lot of caffeine. I'm not saying that to, make anyone feel weird about it. But when we're not aware of those things, right? Things like that, I think y'all probably saw in it that in the Panera Bread, the Lightning drink, right? She wasn't aware of it, right? And so when we're not aware of what we're doing, when we're just kind of taking it at face value, we're not kind of looking at what's in it, those negative outcomes can happen to us. So I think, again, just going back to that cultural sensitivity and trying to, tap into that and starting with people, I think, and putting it out there. Because I think, Gardopia has done a great job of that because they've been around a long, long time. And, it's great to see how many people have kind of come and started really enjoying the message. But it takes time, I wish it was, because even like these diets, nothing ever happens as quick as we want it to. And we're used to that, right? You can just pick up your phone, hit a button, and you'll get whatever you want in like an hour most of the time, right? But that's not how people change. Behavior change is one of the hardest things to kind of get people on board with. But very good question. Any other questions? Yes, sir. Tap water. I think tap water is okay. I think people kind of get nervous about it because of the piping, but I think with the filtration and the purification process that SAWS does, at least what I can know of San Antonio, I think tap water is safe. I think it can vary from place to place, but in terms of San Antonio, I think it's good. I assume drinking. Yeah. Mhm.
But I think cars program kind of and that's the whole
Mhm. Yes, we are. Yeah, we are very spoiled with a lot of our municipalities. It doesn't always feel that way, but truthfully, when you get into the nitty gritty of it, we really do have good systems in place. I love them. So here's the thing. So you might have heard this phrase, kind of fresh is best, right? And the way our food systems work, and I'm not the best because I'm not an ag guy. That's not my area of expertise, but I know a little bit because I work with them. And so what I've learned and what I've seen in a variety of presentations and information is that peak freshness is like right when you cut it, right? And then the clock starts. And so I'm going to use those H-E-B spinach bags, right? Those have likely been harvested the previous day or pretty close to it, right? But the clock started already. Frozen vegetables, they do the same thing, get them cleaned up, and they freeze it. And so what I like about frozen vegetables is it stays like that. Now, there is a shelf life to that, right? Now, 4 years from now, when you're looking at those vegetables, the degradation is going to be there. But if you're going to compare frozen vegetables to maybe a bag of spinach that has now wilted and gone away in a week, I think there is a benefit there, and then the nutrients can also still be there. Mileage is going to vary, right? Because there's a lot of other factors that can go into play into that. But to me, frozen vegetables is a really good source of still fresh produce in the sense of the nutrients. I myself eat a lot of fresh, not fresh. I myself eat a lot of frozen produce. I like to mix it up. My balance is I have quite a bit of fresh fruit. I like frozen vegetables, canned vegetables, because sometimes I know from my own behavior, right? I meant every word when I bought that produce, when I bought that strawberries, when I bought that spinach, I had every intention of eating it in that moment. And then the week went by, life got hard, and then I was like, oh. And you feel guilty. And that's not to make anyone feel guilty. This is just, again, I'm going to always bring it back to we're human and it can be difficult from day to day. And so to give ourselves that grace, give ourselves that leeway. And I think, a lot of these systems, like, again, frozen food is a great way to do that because then I can pull it out when I need it. I can heat it up, and you can do a lot of different things with it. So I'm a big proponent of frozen food. Mhm. Right. Right.
It seems like associated with poverty as well, where there's still
Yes. Yeah.
they're still out there.
Yeah. Yes. Absolutely. You know, because again, it's good to have a mix because again, and then even then, you can always, if you handle it the right way, you can freeze your fresh produce to get that longevity out of it, right? People tend to kind of go like not all or nothing, but I mean, again, life gets in the way, and we don't always do what we thought we were going to do. But no, I mean, they're great to have. I like them, and I always promote them. You know, and then I buy what's in season, you know, because again, a lot of questions that we get, well, how do I do it? How do I eat healthy? You know, I feel like I go to the store and I'm like taking out a car loan or something, you know. And so I tell them, you know, you gotta buy in season. You gotta figure it out. There's a reason, you know, modern agriculture, there's a lot of benefits to it. You didn't always used to get watermelons in December. That wasn't a thing, right? And so, but because of that, there are prices, right? Watermelons, you know, they're a summer one. And so when you have these options, right, because the variety has just gotten crazy in a good way, you know. And so just being aware of it and having that mindset when you are, you know, kind of choosing these things and what you're going to use, I think is really good. Because also the research done, your average household, it throws about $1,000 of food away a year. You know, that's eating out, that's groceries. You know, that's the equivalent of when you go shopping, you just left a bag right there on the ground, right? And so food waste can be difficult to handle because again, we're watching for expiration dates, best by dates, sell by dates, you know, and so we're trying to kind of balance it all out. Like I think, you know, being aware of it, having that information is really key to making those good changes. Good question though, very good questions. Yeah. Mhm.
I still think that isn't that because my confidence.
Mhm. Right, and a lot of countries have like a version of that. Yeah. Mhm. Right. Mhm. Right. And yeah, and we've had very good presentations and talk conversations about that. And I think it varies from region to region. So, you know, for my program, we're actually nationwide. We're in every state and territory in the country. And so what FNEP, Expanded Food Nutrition Education Program, focuses on in San Antonio is we try to find those Hispanic, Latino cultural competencies. But I've had colleagues in Georgia, right? Southern Black communities, right? We don't want to demonize those food because we try to very hard to say there's no such thing as good food and bad food, right? Because someone might see, you know, your typical, uh, Southern Black meal. Maybe there's collard greens, maybe there's sweet potatoes, um, you know, some kind of protein, but there's vegetables on that plate, right? Now, do we got to dial back, you know, maybe some of the lard and salt and things we put into it? Sure, but you can say that for you know, Hispanic Latino food as well. You know, when I talk to people about, you know, tacos, that's what I was. Oh, I got to cut back on the tacos. It's like, I mean, sure, we can, we want to, right? But we don't need to cut it out, right? Like I said, because if I start telling people, you got to start eating hummus, you got to start eating nothing but spinach salads, like people cringe when they hear the sometimes when they, yeah. Right. 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 Yeah. And so I think, and for us, what we try to do is, again, we're all usually from where we work. So I'm born and raised San Antonio. I have colleagues, you know, in every every urban area in Texas that do exactly what I do. And so it varies, like in the Valley and El Paso, because what they consider cultural food is different from what we consider, even in San Antonio to El Paso. Even, you know, because a lot of us are very hyper regional in the sense of what we're marketing and what we're telling people. Uh, the main theme is always going to be there, though, in terms of find that balance and being aware of what we're putting into our cooking. Because sometimes what happens is when we're trying to be culturally sensitive, which we want to be in terms of the food, is that we kind of let go of those things that are harming us, you know, and you know, in Hispanic men, it's usually heart disease is the big proponent and the number one killer, right? And so a lot of that can stem from the food we're putting in. People use manteca, you know, lard in the cooking. They'll kind of say, but that's what the flavor is. Like, I hear you, but we can always come back. But I'll let you guys go. I just got my signal. Yeah, you know. I appreciate you guys listening to me. If y'all have any questions, I'll be hanging around for a bit outside. Again, you can always find us here. We're always doing different events. But I appreciate y'all being here, truly. Thank y'all. Thank y'all.
have a kind of a suite of programming that I do under that. But that started for me by writing checks to pay for loads of tomatoes, and then turned into buying and selling tomatoes to Wendy's, to the government. And so here locally, we'll talk about, and what I'll talk about is a little more hyper local of what we do now to do community distribution. But I will tell you that, like, in that ecosystem of food here, right, River City Produce, we are statewide all across Texas. And yes, that is distribution of locally sourced and nationally sourced produce. Our job is to feed about 2 to 3 million people every single day. And that does take a variety of inputs to do that. Now, yes, prisons, schools, hospitals, restaurants, all the things, and I've sold to all the people. But my focus nowadays tends to be on how do I take that produce that we're receiving in a warehouse that size, right, and use it to create more food access for people, decrease food waste in our own industry by using things that would have normally not made it out the door because it's out in the warehouse a little too long. Now, it's not, I'm not selling the end of life produce, but there is a space for that instead of pallets and cases, eaches, and then turning that access into opportunities for produce literacy and education as well. So it'll be like a little overall part of it, and that'll be kind of what that moment looks like for us today. Yeah, we're good? Okay, okay. I'm okay? Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Jamie Gonzalez. Let me turn my little mic back on, actually. There we go. My name is Jamie Gonzalez. People call me the produce lady. They also call me the puta de la fruta, not at churches and schools, though. So the produce lady, that's my fancy name nowadays. I am the community engagement manager for River City Produce and Chicho Boys. I'm also the Food Policy Council president, sit on the Health Equity Committee of the American Heart Association. In addition to that, I am on the executive committee of the Mayor's Fitness Council, the president of the Food Policy Council. I've been part of the Food Policy Council for almost 8 years. I've been the president for about a year. Walking into my first Food Policy Council meeting as one of the only produce distributors in San Antonio, no matter which company I represented, even when it was my own, it means a lot to me. And it says a lot about how we distribute produce and our understanding of it in this city. But that Food Policy Council meeting, that first one that I went to, because a chef that I knew told me that I really needed to go, it lit a fire under me. At that time, I was about 10 or 12 years into doing this type of work, produce distribution. And we'll get a little bit more into what that means. I was searching for a new meaning for that for myself. I had left food at one point, came back 10 years later with a mission to, yes, continue to sell fruits and vegetables to people, but not only to the Johnny Hernandez's of the world or to the big hotels and restaurants, but to really create moments for people to engage in produce more fully so that they could enjoy it more. And I didn't even know what that meant at the time. What I did know was that I was coming out of healthcare. And I knew that coming back to this, because food was my favorite thing that I ever did, was going to be my contribution to the healthcare crisis. I would find a way to feed more people every single day. So I wandered into that Food Policy Council meeting, and the chef had told me, he goes, you need to come. There's some really weird people here. They're exactly the kind of people that you need to meet, Jamie, and they need somebody realistic like you. And I was there for 15 minutes and I was absolutely sold. My experience with the people that I've met through the Food Policy Council over the years is what's helped me understand not only what a food system is and the food system, but what my place is in the food system and why it's important. And it also helped me understand that the food system and having conversations about it, it's not just experts sitting at table talking about food distribution or urban agriculture or produce distribution. It's all of us. We all are part of it. We eat in the food system, we work in the food system. And I will tell you that I have more job security than just about anybody else in this city because I sell fresh food to people. And knowing how to do that, knowing how to change with the times and understanding what that need is for people, because everybody eats and everybody should eat and enjoy eating. Knowing that and being able to adjust to that and the time that we live in is the most important part of surviving in produce distribution. Now, what does that mean? Produce distribution is the movement of fruits and vegetables across the city, across the county, across the state, across the country. When we think of this, and many times when we come to this type of event, many people are going to talk to you about that hyper-local movement of local food, creating a local sustainable food system. And that's super, super important. Taking back those pieces of land, understanding how to grow on them and use them and do that more for ourselves and work in community in that way. While it is important, local community gardens and local urban farms, they struggle at times. And there's time, and the reason why they struggle is because of interest and input, being able to sustain volunteers in an area where people may not have the means or not know what's going on or understand what this is. So somebody like me comes along and has spent many years, like I said, selling produce to hotels and prisons and hospitals and schools and fancy restaurants and all the things that you think of where there's food, and to grocery stores as well. About 30 years ago, the produce distribution landscape in the city was very, very different. And the reason why it was different was because this city was made up of about 75 different produce companies at that time. Now, we're not talking produce like we produce things. We're talking produce, fruits, and vegetables, and that general word produce that comes from it, right? Back then, in the area that I grew up in and in the produce terminal market, the majority of the companies that were in the market were sharing contracts with each other. We were not as competitive with each other as we are today. And about 8 different companies that were owned by 8 different families shared a lot of the distribution of the produce in this city. And the majority of that went to the military, to Wendy's, to Whataburger, and to H-E-B. About 30 years ago, H-E-B began to consolidate their produce purchasing at the time. And so we very quickly saw the consolidation of the produce companies as well. Today, the produce terminal market is still there. There's about 30 companies that exist on it. There is a second produce terminal market that is owned by the people from McAllen, Texas. So now you have a distribution center that's not even owned locally anymore. In addition to that, River City Produce exists outside of both of those. Whole different conversation that we could have about the real life of produce people and all of the drama that we create. My husband's here today and he's kind of laughing inside right now because he's grown up with this with me as well. And so all of us now compete for our business. We don't share contracts anymore. There is no friendly business amongst us. And when you distribute produce in the way that we do, there's a lot of different ways to do it and a lot of different inputs. The taquerias need produce. The fruterias need produce. The restaurants need produce and our schools need produce. I came back in 2016 wanting to find new ways to distribute produce into the community, a little more thoughtfully, to increase sustainability, to decrease waste in our industry, because the produce distribution industry at all levels is extremely wasteful, sometimes on purpose, sometimes not. And as H-E-B began to grow and really get big, and they didn't need us to buy and sell them produce anymore at a certain level, a lot of us survived because we changed with H-E-B. And I'll focus on H-E-B in those moments because Albertsons came and went, Kroger came and went. Many of us distributed produce outside of that, but it's H-E-B that moves the mark on the food economy every single day in the city. Do not fool yourselves. They control the cost of your food every day. And that's not just at the grocery store. That is in restaurants. That is in schools. That is in hospitals. And why is that? No, they're not selling directly to them, but when you make big buys, everybody else is affected by that produce distribution, right? So if the biggest guy in the city is buying up most of the produce or has contracted most of the farms, not just locally, but nationally and internationally, they are setting the base price for all food in your city. Now, that sounds a little ominous. It absolutely is. That being said, H-E-B, they are local to us, right? They have great things. They promote themselves very well, and they do create a wealth of opportunities for people and jobs for thousands of people, right? In addition to that, because of the organization that they are and the buying power that they have, most people don't realize that our food cost here in South Texas is actually much lower than the national standard. There's good and bad things about that. While we think our food is very expensive and food has gone up in price, we are not facing some of the costs that other people face. And that does help us, but it does not help us when we go into a grocery store to understand what the true cost of food is. In addition to that, all retailers in this country, when we talk about food waste and sustainability, right? They're the number one department in your grocery store, right? That has the most accepted loss is the fresh produce department. Your local retailer is okay with losing over 30% of that produce, 30%. They already know that they'll throw away at least 30%. It dies the fastest, right? It's the most natural item there. And so when we look at that type of distribution and how do we manage that, people often ask me, because when I was first became part of the Food Policy Council, I helped create a program called the Healthy Corner Store Initiative here in San Antonio. And I'm going to ask the people sitting in the room, how many of you here have heard of the Healthy Corner Store program in San Antonio? You see some hands? All right. I would expect Lucas too, by the way. And so the Healthy Corner Store program took many years to get started. It was not popular, still not super popular, by the way. And it's a hard program to live and work through. And why did we do that? One, not all HEBs are created equal. Not all stores are created equal. Not just your HEB, but your Walmart, your Target, your Michoacanas, your La Fiestas. They are all different. And they are all set in place based on the neighborhoods that they're in, the socioeconomic elements of that area, the number of people that shop with Lone Star cards or EBT and WIC determines the variety of produce and food that you see at your local retailer. So no, they're not all created equal. I could take you to some HEBs where you're like, wow, this is really an HEB, you know. And I spoke at an event a couple of years ago about the Healthy Corner Store program for It's Time Texas. And people that were in areas of Texas that are not around an HEB, one of the questions that they asked about the Healthy Corner Store program was, well, how do you keep up? Because what if you identify a store that could be potentially putting fruits and vegetables in, and they decide to open an HEB across the street? And I told the lady, I was like, you're clearly not from San Antonio. We don't build HEBs anymore in established neighborhoods, in established parts of the city. There's no economic benefit for them to do that. So you will not see a new HEB on the east side of San Antonio unless everybody comes together and really probably pushes it. In addition to that, they'll still tell you that it's probably not going to happen. The rural parts of the city will get those HEBs potentially, but more slowly, right? And because of that, we have not just huge gaps of food insecurity or food deserts, but we also live in food swamps where it's not just that fresh fruits and vegetables or whole foods aren't available to us, but the other options for us in the areas that we live in, that we work in, because you may not live in a food desert, but you probably work in one. And what do you do for lunch? Are you going to take your lunch every day? What are your options at lunchtime or in between when you're making those choices? How hard is it to make a healthier choice that day? All reasons that led me to the type of work that I do now. And when I came back and I met my Food Policy Council friends, I started to have these moments of not just understanding what that food system is and the beginning of growing the food to getting it to your table, but fully realizing how underrepresented everybody that comes in between that truly is. When COVID hit and I was doing food at the time, I was supposed to be opening restaurants at the Pearl with a couple of chefs. That was going to be my moment to get out of the warehouse, and COVID hit, stopped that. And I was at Big State Produce at the time, which is where I first started doing produce distribution. And we all sat there and we looked at each other. And when COVID shut the city down, Big State Produce and its sister company at the time, Unifresh, lost 90% of their business overnight. Not only did we lose 90% of our business with 50 employees, I'm at River City now, we have 200 employees, but those 50 employees needed jobs and needed work to do, needed work. And additionally, the schools didn't really close. They just minimally shut down. We still had to feed kids. We still had to feed hospitals. We were still working on corner stores. And when that happened, everybody looked at each other and said, well, what do we do now? And I said, we're going to sell boxes of produce to people. The immediate need and what many people saw during that time of going into the produce terminal market and driving up and buying this like 50-pound box of fruits and vegetables for like $20, which is absolutely not sustainable, okay, was a response that all of us had actually. One after another, the companies started doing it. They're like, oh man, what's Jamie doing over there? We needed to clean out our warehouses before we threw everything away. Because most of us don't sell directly to H-E-B, one of the things that we do with H-E-B in this city, and River City does this, and River City does sell to H-E-B, by the way, is that we find creative ways to work for retailers like H-E-B and like Walmart. A lot of produce in this country is rejected at the receiving end of your retailer, okay? Before about 2005, the majority of that rejected fruits and vegetables would have been thrown away and put into a landfill, okay? Why is it rejected? And I know that a lot of people have already heard of imperfect produce, imperfect foods, different conversation. But at the time, we knew that there was a way to sustain ourselves, and this is pre-COVID. So H-E-B rejects a load of asparagus because it's leaning, like literally it's leaning, the pallets are leaning. That's why they don't want it. That's an insurance claim. And when I was younger, I learned to eat asparagus because H-E-B was willing to throw so much of it away. By the way, I don't like broccoli. And so that kind of work would come to warehouses like ours, and we're taking it off and we're fixing it, or we're checking the sugar on it, or we're resizing the mangoes, or putting the PLU stickers that weren't on all of the bags of green beans onto them. And we are paid pennies on the dollar to do that work and get it back into the retailer. The extra produce that comes from that, whatever it is then allowed to be kept by us. We pay it after market price, and we find ways to put it into the community, into restaurants, into hotels as well. We live and survive on a lot of this now. Is one of the main ways that produce is rescued from retailers because they don't want to take the time or spend the money in a billion-dollar industry to make sure that somebody just restacks that asparagus for them, right? So a lot of the boxes that we were making during COVID and that I continue to make today or take at my produce markets, they are made up of a lot of that opportunistic produce. Ways that I can get you to look at things and see things that you don't normally buy, because dragon fruit is $5 at the store. And if you don't know if you really love it or not, you're never going to spend the $5 on it, right? But I can sell it to you for $1. You can try it out. So the boxes happened. There was a lot of different programs at the time where a lot of different boxes were made in this city. I did not make all of them. And some of them were USDA subsidized boxes. Did not make those boxes either. And many people are aware of a program called the Farmer to Family Food Box Program that was paid for by the USDA during COVID. It's a very popular program to hate during COVID as well. Thousands and thousands of boxes came into this city from a variety of people. Some of them were made by people in this city. And I also use that as an opportunity to distribute more produce to people as well. Here's what was wrong with that box. And when we look at produce distribution and the healthfulness of food, if we're going to put a box of produce together and try to bring it out into the community, whether it's in a parking lot distribution, at a food pantry, or that somebody actually wants to legitimately buy your box of produce and spend money on it, right? Then there has to be, how do I put this? Nutrient-dense foods in that box, right? In addition to that, there needs to be a realistic variety of food in that box. And the government all over this country paid for boxes of produce to be delivered to food banks and food pantries and multiple organizations made by produce companies, made by produce distributors for the lowest dollar bid, for the lowest dollar bid. We were allowed to sell those boxes and make as much money as we wanted to. The average box cost $25. And in that $25 box that you got free, including your letter from Donald Trump that said, you got a free box of produce, was usually about 5 pounds of potatoes, 5 pounds of oranges, 5 pounds of apples, 5 pounds of onions, and probably a gallon of milk and a bag of processed pork product that may or may not have actually been pork. And also to distribute that much pork around the country to people who don't really eat pork is an additional slap in the face. Yeah, that's food, right? And it costs $25 to have it dropped in your trunk. Okay. Volunteers across the country distributed those boxes for free. If they're going to make a box like that, I'm going to make sure people get them. My husband and I actually were part of a group of people that used our own funds and resources to rent trucks to make sure that these boxes were not going to waste and being thrown in a landfill while the government was paying for them. I did a lot of that work in partnership with EcoCentro. EcoCentro has been an invaluable partner to me over the years, not just because they're huge supporters of the Food Policy Council, but because they were willing and their team was willing to stand up during COVID and say, there are many people and many organizations that do not traditionally qualify for food distribution from large entities such as the San Antonio Food Bank. Who are those people? And during COVID, you could say that the food bank was really just putting food into anybody's trunks and cars, and that's very realistic. But most of the time, and in most cases in the state of Texas, the people that do not qualify for things like SNAP benefits or free food distributions are single individuals, single males, veterans, seniors, people without children in their home, people who don't qualify for WIC, people who do not qualify for SNAP. And in partnership with EcoCentro, we worked together with over 50 organizations at that time to distribute over 2 million pounds of produce in less than 12 months. Yep. Thank you, Rose, right? The notoriety that I gained from helping do that and from being the person that said, I'm going to distribute this box, but I don't like this box, is what helped me, was what was a catalyst for me to be able to create an additional level of programming for a $25 box. My $25 box, which still exists today, was actually helped, started by Bexar County. And they said, we need help. We need to end these lines. We need to do a home delivery box. And I was like, oh, it's my time to shine. And I got a phone call the day that the large distribution happened at Traders Village. And somebody said, Jamie, the county can't have this. We got to do something else. And I have been working for this my whole life. And I said, I'm your girl. And they awarded us $250,000 to start a home delivery produce program. And we were able to distribute about 15,000 boxes to people's homes, not in parking lots, home delivery boxes for $25 without additional delivery fee that has at least 15 to 20 different items in it. Things like asparagus, things like spinach and mushrooms and berries and figs. So we were able to change it, to look at it differently. That has grown over the years, not just into boxes, but bags and produce markets. I was speaking at an event like this in 2020, actually with Stephen, and I got somebody from the city slid into my DMs and somebody from the American Heart Association did as well. And they were like, hey, we want to talk to you more about what you're doing. And I launched our first traveling produce markets. Those produce markets are like traveling farmers markets for people who don't get to go to traditional farmers markets. Next year, I'll talk about the farmers market system in this country and why it's not equitable. It's not equitable for farmers. It doesn't reach enough people. Most people don't get to go out on a Tuesday morning to go get their fruits or vegetables. In addition to that, we also have to look at the access barriers and where most farmers markets that are supposed to be USDA certified, where they are actually existing in our neighborhoods. They are not existing in San Antonio on the east side, the west side, or the south side of town. They never will, right? And so I took it upon myself to create a new version of that. That first year, we did 12 markets. In my third year, last year, we did 184 markets that year alone. This year, We will host over 300 produce markets around the city. Hospitals, schools, community centers. We take over 60 different fruits and vegetables, both locally and nationally grown, to people and bring them into community for a price that is affordable to everybody, right? And create food literacy opportunities by cooking with people, by doing a variety of distributions that allow people to learn the difference between a kiwi and a lime, right? That have the ability to get people excited about fruits and vegetables, and also know that it's realistic not to like certain things. Again, I don't like broccoli. And the city did a whole campaign about broccoli because they knew I didn't like broccoli. It's true. And in doing so, we help different organizations spend their money a little more wisely when they want to do food access work. One of the things that a lot of organizations, not just the city of San Antonio and the county, but nonprofits, what they learned was that they want to help feed people, but they are not the people who are experts in feeding people every day. It's okay. And I love their money and I want to help you eat better with their money. And so we have created what you would call a voucher program, and I call a healthy rewards program in this city that is growing by leaps and bounds. When you shop at one of my produce markets today, yes, you're getting the produce that goes to all the fancy restaurants and the schools and all of those things. But when you shop at one of my produce markets, regardless if you qualify for SNAP benefits or WIC or any of those types of benefits, because you came and you made a healthier choice, you were willing to be a little more adventurous that day. You spend at least $5 with me, sometimes it's even less, then we're going to give you at least $5 to $10 more in produce for free. We're going to double that up for you. We're creating GAP programs for people who don't traditionally qualify. And by doing that, we are reaching thousands and thousands of people, not just every year, not just every month, but every week now. I'm gonna cry. So, and people have really bought into this, which I absolutely love. Since 2020, I have worked with over 60 different organizations to distribute over 6 million pounds of produce to hundreds of thousands of people. We have distributed over 200 varieties of produce to people. And I've done most of that with 4 staff members in a van and an army of volunteers. That is the life cycle of produce distribution. But why am I doing this? Yes, I love to feed people. Yes, we want to create sustainability economically in programs that pay for themselves over time, that people are buying them, they're investing in them, but that those organizations that have the means and the want to help be part of an army of people feeding each other and creating community and increasing food literacy, that they have a place to do that at, and that we're going to be respectful of their money while we respect our time in our community. One of the number one reasons I do this, though, is so that we can start creating a stronger, more sustainable food system here. The only way for the local community gardens to get enough people to volunteer on a regular basis and that we can grow those concepts and ideas, the only way for us to be able to encourage new farmers, young people to farm, people have never had an opportunity to have their own land, eventually have land to farm on with other programming that I'm doing. The only way to do that is to make sure that you know the difference between a lime and a kiwi. Because if you don't, why would you even begin to go and help the garden every weekend, right? And if we don't do this and bring more people in and get them excited about fruits and vegetables, because when I do, I am a gateway drug, they're going to start to feel comfortable enough to ask me a lot of different questions about your food, where it comes from, why is it coming there? Can I grow this? And then we're going to have conversations about the systemic reasons that we don't have continuous access to quality, affordable food. We may start having conversations about housing and health equity and civic engagement. Connecting people to food is a pathway to civic engagement. And that is how I use my notoriety and the produce that I have access to get people not just excited about eating more fruits and vegetables and being part of the food system, but empowering them to have a voice, to speak up. And it comes from a place of, you know what you're talking about now. You know who to be angry at. It's okay to be angry. I want you to. I want you to eat more fruits and vegetables, but I want you to know the difference between the city and the county. I want you to be able to support our policy initiatives at the Food Policy Council and understand what they mean and go to things like Citizen Speak Up with City Council. And I do that with fruits and vegetables every single day. Like 2 minutes left. Oh, I could keep going. Oh, lovely. I'm gonna go like for another minute and then we'll do some questions from you guys. And so that is where it all kind of comes back together. Today, we have contracts with the city of San Antonio, where I travel through the Senior Community Center program here in the city, the Congregate Meal Program, which is a free program for seniors. If you have never been to one of like the 60 different senior community centers in San Antonio, find a way to check it out. Volunteer with me, you will. You'll start trying to pick out which one you want to hang out at when you get older. I'm not that far from it. And that person who slid into my DMs helped me start a program with the city that is now funded by them for the next 5 years. It allows me to go into our community centers, cook with seniors, talk to them about fruits and vegetables, have that moment where I'm like, Jamie doesn't like broccoli and everybody else does. And then afterwards, I feed them, they receive free produce boxes, and then they come and they shop at my produce market. When I started doing that version of my programming, people told me that I was crazy, that seniors would not want to do this, and that they would not spend their money on fruits and vegetables because they only like to get stuff for free. I live with 2 seniors, and my father was one of the people that told me that. And he works in produce. That has not been the case. And we have seen record numbers of seniors turn out to our produce markets. Hello. To our produce markets every week now. And we regularly host about 150 seniors in these classes. People show up for what we do. We make it a good time. They learn about food. They learn a little bit more about why Jamie doesn't like broccoli. And then they turn around and they spend an average of $8 at my produce markets. A realistic amount of food for a senior. Most people that come to my markets, like at my hospital markets, we walk into a hospital, we set up six tables of produce, and generally in that 2-hour period, about 100 to 150 people will come and shop through. The average person spends $12 to $15 at my market. That's including the discount that they receive, which is also a realistic amount of food for somebody. That $12 to $15 generally gets you 28 to 30 different items. You walk away with 3 bags of produce. And it's in those moments and the excitement of it that we see that continuous return of people. The volunteers that we engage with and the interns that we've worked with over the years have gone into different career paths. The high school students that I've worked with, I'm graduating 3 seniors this year, who I've been with for 3 years now. 2 of them will be going into public health policy. And that is definitely because I taught them the difference between a kiwi and a lime, and I will take credit for that every single day. Those moments are allowing people to earn free produce when they volunteer with me. It gets them more excited and engaged in their community as well. And that is that growth of what we continue to do. And it allows me to get you super excited about talking about Food Policy Council work later, so that you'll also volunteer at our food forest efforts, our urban farm projects that we have kicking off. I am trying to get people to understand where their food comes from and excited about food, so that you will go and hang out at Gardopia every single weekend, right? So thank you so much. I'm no, sorry. And so anyway, I know we have a couple of minutes left. Who has questions for me? Make them hard questions too. Yes, sir, Cohen. Very good question. So there's a lot going on with EBT and conversations about EBT benefits here in San Antonio right now. Chicho Boys, which is owned by River City Produce and is across the street from us, we are testing an EBT program here in San Antonio that's supposed to not just help people access more fresh fruits and vegetables, but get you talking about EBT more and whether or not you should be applying for it. There are only 30% of the people receiving SNAP benefits in San Antonio that would potentially qualify right now. There's a lot of barriers to applying for SNAP. There's a lot of time in applying for SNAP. But at Chicho Boys right now, we have the Double Up Food Bucks program. That program allows people to come in every single day, use their Lone Star card, immediately receive 50% off their fruits and vegetables. By the end of the year, EBT will be available at my produce markets, and that program will as well. All right. But in the 4 years that we've been doing produce markets already, it comes up very little, which is really odd, right? You're like, wow, why aren't more people asking for EBT, like to be able to use EBT? And Lucas and I have a rule when we have a produce market. If somebody comes up to us and asks to use their EBT card, we are not going to turn them away. We're not going to swipe their card. We make a note of how many people ask us, and then we fully subsidize their purchase, right? The reason why it doesn't come up more is not because I'm not in the neighborhoods where it's at. It's because so few people actually have SNAP benefits here in San Antonio. And it's a true indicator of that. We do believe that when we add that to the markets, they're going to blow up even more. But like I said, over 100 people regularly shop at all of my markets in a 2-hour period, and it comes up less than you would think. It's also because the food bank owns traveling EBT and WIC availability to their USDA certified farmers markets. And that has a lot to do with it. So they do see the majority of it. Farmers markets that are part of what I would call a parking lot craft market with a little bit of produce, that comes up very regularly there because people often shop through for craft goods, and then the produce is the afterthought. And when the and not to do that, truly control that here as well. One of the markets that I can kind of talk about a little bit is there's a wonderful market that happens once a month out at the Mission Marquee Drive-In. Okay. The food bank used to go to that one. And you know, everybody's it's a business no matter what. So it has to make sense for them to have people out there, right? And I know that they're doing some restructuring. They've decided not to go back. When they did that, the farmers there lost the ability to take EBT, and they were told, well, hey, just start your own farmers market, which is a little bit of a challenge for people. Do you know what I mean? There's an organization that has to happen that goes around it. And so if that continues to be a problem, then it will be like the next area that I branch my work out in, so that the farmers have a place to do this alongside of me. I don't want them out there like languishing that way. That is part of how they make their money in the farmers market system. Yeah. Okay. I'm assuming a minimum by.
I don't serve 50 pounds of potatoes, but I might have 15.
Mhm.
Is that something that y'all are able to buy, or?
So I can,
your favorite?
yeah, I can be a little creative with it. Okay. And I've worked with a lot of small farms over the years in trying to kind of establish what that is. That 15 pounds of tomatoes, which I know are going to be beautiful tomatoes and actually taste like a tomato, right? That is less than half a case to us. I mean, realistically, right? That's less than half a case. However, there's a lot of reasons why we would be open to that. Here's what it takes to do something like that. Okay. I have to know your farm. I'm going to have to see it at least one time. I have to know that your growing practices are meeting a minimum standard of good agricultural practices. River City Produce is a third-party certified food safety food safety certified distributor. And because we sell to people like Walmart, HEB, that type of thing, there is a set of standards for our food safety programming that we adhere to. I've also been called the food safety lady. And so when I look at independent farms, there's kind of an onboarding, no matter what size farm you are. Those 15 pounds would probably never be used in our regular day-to-day distribution. But part of the reason why we have our box program and my produce market program is so that we can engage with small farms like that. And we can also look at helping that small farm understand the language that we use in a larger volume distribution, where you're going to tell me like, here's a good example, okay? And first of all, please grow more than just tomatoes, because everybody grows tomatoes, right? Like that's it. Everybody grows tomatoes. But like I have people that'll grow greens, like collards. That's a good example, right? And I'll get a call from a local farm. They may grow them in their greenhouse or their like shipping container, and they'll be like, Jamie, I have 12 pounds of collards to sell to you. And I'm like, yeah, how many bunches do you have? Okay. And so and they're not used to that. You're going to be like, I don't even know what that means. And I'll be like, look, a standard case is 24. Like, how do you even? And so I like to come in and create a relationship where I'm not going to force you to be like corporate food, if you want to look at it that way. And very oftentimes I'm like, oh, great, I'm the man. And I'm at an age where I don't want to be the man. But I'm going to come in and have those conversations where I'm like, okay, this is how we would like for you to be able to bunch it so that we have conversations where we're using the same dialogue, we're speaking the same language. If you tell me you have 20 pounds of strawberries, I can turn that into something because I know what a pound of strawberries looks like. But if you tell me that you have like 2 bushels of Brussels sprouts, I'm like, I don't know what you mean. And so having a relationship with a small growing farm to kind of understand what that looks like, it's not only going to help me use your produce and buy it and get it out into the community, but it's going to help you speak in the economy of food in a way that more people like me are going to be willing to have those conversations with you. And if you're selling directly to like restaurants, right? You're going to be empowered to like do that as a better business person. You know, we want you to be able to sustain yourself appropriately. And then I will kind of say this, and this is a personal thing. Not everybody can grow microgreens. It's not sustainable. There's not enough of a market for it. You know, please, that is like the multi-level marketing scheme of food in like 2024. I get so many calls, Jamie, I'm going to start a microgreens farm. Do you think you could sell them all? And I'm like, dude, you're like the 12th person in the last 2 months. It is not. There are people out there, they're like, I've seen the reels of TikToks. Microgreens are the wave of the future. And I'm just like, no, they're not. Yes, you will not make $1 million selling micro. Yeah, no. Yeah, absolutely. If you're going to have to sell it at like $5 to $8 a clam, or you want to sell it to a store, like in my Healthy Corner Store program, right? First of all, really think about where these stores are. The corner store program in the city is not the answer to fixing food insecurity. Even in the beginning of trying to create this program, even I knew that. It's not the answer. It's a good place. There's a lot of reasons why people will walk in and buy those fruits and vegetables, or why we want them to. And I have a wonderful, like in the very beginning, like very early on, I have a store who's been with me for about 3 years now. They're no longer subsidized by the local government. They just still buy produce. That means that works. 2 businesses engaging with each other and selling affordable produce to people. It's called the Issy Cat Food Mart. It's at the roundabout on Blanco, next to the Beacon Hill Deli. Go to the Beacon Hill if you haven't, okay? Shout out to my friends at Beacon Hill. But that place is very tiny. Put in fruits and vegetables. They are selling, no lie, about $100 to $200 worth of fruits and vegetables every week. The size of that store is like that section that you're in. And I drove in one night. It's actually very close to my house. And I will go into the stores at all different times. And I get there, and this guy rides up on a bike when I'm still sitting in my car. And he changes his bike up. He goes in. I go in a few minutes later, and one of the people working at the counter was one of the owners. And she tells him, look, That's that produce lady that's bringing all the produce here that you asked about. And he has a tall boy and a lime and an avocado, right? And he tells me, I want to thank you for bringing this into our neighborhood because he goes, because I don't get in as much trouble with my lady when I ride down here. Why is that? He tells me, he's all, now when I come and get my beer, I can get a real lime for it. And I buy her an avocado and take it home and she's happier with me. That is a success story. That is the way that people are using fruits and vegetables. We see an average about 6 to 8 vegetables in stores, although I have many stores that are selling things like blueberries, like on the west side, and turmeric, and stuff like that, but not all of them do that. And the volume that really comes out of there without creating more waste, right? What did I say in the beginning? Retailers are okay with losing over 30% of their fresh produce. The guy that owns the corner store that's making his money off the lotto and the bongs and the Takis and stuff like that, he is not okay with throwing away 30% of his produce. And one of the reasons why we work so hard at this program is it's hard to make money. We, like, as the vendor, and I've been the vendor for many years now, we don't force people to buy full cases of anything. We keep our minimums low so that they can put realistic quantities in and they're not throwing it away. But I also learned that, people don't just go in and see that and think, oh, I'm going to go buy I'm going to go buy a flamingo pear today. Flamingo pears are amazing, by the way. But I'm going to go buy a flamingo pear today. They're not normally thinking that. But if we are in the community where these stores are located, there are more than 40 stores that carry fruits and vegetables now in San Antonio. If we're doing other work in the community that's increasing food literacy and increasing the knowledge of programs like this, where the stores are located at, what's the difference between a kiwi and a lime, so that you don't think that there's bad limes at the store you go to. See, I say that because I had that experience with people. Then putting produce markets in those neighborhoods, making sure that our Food RX boxes are going out into those neighborhoods. People are buying those boxes, or different distribution styles with organizations like Methodist Healthcare Ministries, the Gonzaga Foundation, and health and wellness programming that we're very much embedded in now, so that when I go to you at your work, at your job, and bring you fresh produce there, right? Now I'm getting all the zip codes. You're my captive audience. And many times health and wellness programming through insurance carriers, they are paying for you to receive fruits and vegetables, preventative medicine, right? So organizations like Methodist Healthcare Ministries, and actually the Marriott hotels now, and the Spurs, are all making investments into their staff to receive produce, not just so I come and you spend your money on it, which we're still okay with, but they're also supplementing it for their staff. All of that work is what gets you to walk into a corner store and say, oh, dude, I'm going to buy the fruit cup and the Takis today, and not just do away with all of it. We have to be very realistic about it. And so it was one of my goals to cast like the safety net of food everywhere in the city. And I really am everywhere. There's people that tell me that. There's a reason why people call me the produce lady, right? And yes, I know a lot about produce, but I've made it my mission to make sure that all those gaps are starting to be filled with different types of programming, and that the money that's being spent on it, our tax dollars very often, that we are spending it in a meaningful way for people. So, more questions? Anybody? You have a lot of money? No, I'm just joking. Just kidding. Yeah. Are you part of the Delview Neighborhood Association? Okay, cool. I didn't think so. I'm adjacent to Delview. They're a different breed. And so I actually do a good amount of work in that area. Okay. Tell me the name of that neighborhood association again. Community Association. Okay. I think my brother used to be on that, actually. And so like I go to the YWLA every single month. I host a market right at the end of their school day. It's open to the public. We get a lot of neighborhood people coming in. Yeah. And so, and the people at St. Paul's are really trying to get me to go back in there again. My aunt texts me every month. She's like, come back. And so you would reach out to me directly. We would have a conversation about when that would work, where we would host that at, how many people could we potentially get to come, and the average number of people that I need to have shopping through. And we want to come back with regularity about every 4 to 6 weeks. Yep. Yep. It's that easy. Yes, I would say not necessarily a map, but a monthly calendar. Absolutely. And so, and I can start to send that to you monthly. We have partners where we do like a monthly email. In addition to that, you can follow me on social media. A couple of different handles. They're fairly easy for people. Yes, you can please follow River City Produce. They will get very mad if I don't say that today. Please follow River City Produce. You can follow the Produce Lady SA on Instagram and Facebook. Okay. On the Produce Lady, I target that kind of information of calendar of where we're going to be, community events that we go to. We also have a lot of pop-up events that are fully subsidized where everybody that comes gets like $10 or $15 worth of produce for a lot of different reasons. And also on Instagram and on LinkedIn, you can follow me as the Punta de la Fruta as well. So, and you will find it that way. I have stickers. Those are good ways to find me and to find our resources. Okay. Send me your email through one of those and I'll put you on our distribution list as well. Good. Okay. I will wrap it up now. They gave me the thumbs up and I'm going to tell you guys, please look for our upcoming events. I want to share one more event with you all that we have coming up on the second Saturday of June. It should be June the 8th. It's going to be our Pride Market event with West Care, and it's called Pride on the East Side. That event will be a health and wellness event for the community. There will be mobile STI testing for everybody. There will be a lot of other resources, and it's going to help me live like my next dream of decreasing the stigma of talking about STIs and being tested regularly by rewarding people with fresh produce. Everybody that comes to that market and is tested that day will be able to come through my market and get $10 worth of free fruits and vegetables that day. If you want to buy more, you can buy more. Anybody else that comes through the market and spends a minimum of $5 will get $10 worth of produce for free. We will also be doing a partnered produce box distribution with the Healthy Neighborhoods program. We will distribute over 100 boxes of fruits and vegetables that day for attendees on the east side as well. So right on the east side, come out. I need volunteers. So please be willing to volunteer. And you'll get some free fruits and vegetables that day as well. Thank you all so much. I had a very good time talking to everybody today. Thank you for having me.
green donation last time they had a tree giveaway at Gardopia. Yeah, the bus had a big tour that they went around the United States. Did y'all get to see the bus? Yeah, they had a big green bus that was painted real nice and decorated. Yeah. Sorry, this is my first time coming up. Okay. All right. All right. Hello, my name is Vince, also known as the Texas Urban Farmer on Instagram. And today I'm going to be talking about Korean natural farming. All across the world, it's also known as natural farming. Over here in the West, it's known as Korean natural farming. And Korean natural farming is a holistic and sustainable approach to agriculture that emphasizes the use of indigenous microorganisms and organic inputs, and it also helps with promoting plant fertility and natural farming techniques to help promote healthy, fertile soil and also to help the environment. And along with the Korean natural farming, it's also fermenting your nutrients at home, so that way you can do away with a lot of waste by using bottles and everything that you get with the fertilized company. A lot of those, and not only that, but shipping and everything that it takes to get to where it needs to go, and the fertilized companies and everything like that. Korean natural farming was developed by Dr. Han Chow and has gained global recognition for its effectiveness in producing high quality, nutrient dense crops while maintaining an emphasis and even eliminating the use of harmful synthetic chemicals. Basically, it's giving the gardener the essentials to be able to make the nutrients and the tools that they need at home. So that way they can go ahead and work on the garden and have everything that they need available for them. So through microbial digestion, you're going to be using plants that are available in your garden, so you can get, fast growing weeds. Like, so you have dandelions and things like that. Those are growing really fast. You're going to utilize the nutrients that are in that plant. You're going to extract the nutrients from that plant by microbial digestion and make it bioavailable for your plants. And by doing this, it's going to help increase the microbial diversity within your soil. Hold on. Hold on. This is my first time speaking, and okay, through microbial digestion, you're getting everything that's in that plant to be bioavailable for the plant. So if you're getting a crop it's high in calcium, high in magnesium, or high in phosphorus, all that plant is going to be, all those things are going to be available by microbial digestion and fermentation and be bioavailable for your plants. There's going to be 9 solubles. Kelly, can you turn that off, please? The Instagram. Okay, sorry about that. Okay. Okay, so there's 9 essential solutions that you ferment whenever you're making Korean natural farming. A lot of them that you start off with, the first one is lactic acid bacteria, known as LABs, and it's going to be your bacterial source. And the way that you get your LABs is by culturing lactic acid is everywhere in the air. And so what you're going to do is you're going to use rice to colonize your lactic acid bacteria. And so whenever you get that, you use an IMO box. Here's an IMO box, and what you do is an IMO box is designed to have gaps in the bottom, so that way when you put your rice in here, the rice is going to be the source of collection of your IMO, indigenous microorganisms. Now there's a diversity of different indigenous microorganisms within your area. So what you're going to do is utilize the indigenous microorganisms within your area. So every garden is going to be different, because everywhere it has a diversity of microorganisms that are different in every area. They're going to change according to temperature, weather, and things like that, external climate conditions and things like that. The best time to get them is in warmer temperatures, whenever microorganisms are multiplying and colonizing. So you want to get the IMO box, you put your rice in here, and you're going to make it like an al dente, where it's kind of soft and not too hard, but not too soft. You're going to put your rice in here. You put a napkin to cover it. And then you can put like a hardware cloth over to help from animals digging into it and wanting to eat all the rice and everything. And you put this out for 7 days to get an indigenous microorganism collection. And you want to look where you see mycelium growth. So where you see a lot of fungal growth or old forest growth is where you want to look, like where you see a lot of woody materials and woody molded leaves and things like that. So you put your box down, you want to put it where it's shaded, never whenever you're going to have rain or anything like that. Never right after a rain, because you want the time for the microorganisms to colonize. So after a rain, it's going to wash all the microorganisms away. So you give it a little bit of time after rain to help all the microorganisms cultivate again on the land. So when you put your IMO box, you're collecting those indigenous microorganisms in your space, and you're going to utilize those indigenous microorganisms, and you're going to make it into a liquid solution. And you can use this liquid solution to start watering into your garden to increase the microbiology in your garden. And so once you start inoculating your soil becomes a living organism. And with those microorganisms, they're going to start helping break down all the plant nutrients that are in your soil. So you have phosphorus, nitrogen, potassium, micronutrients, and things like that in your soil. All these microorganisms are going to help break it down, create a symbiotic relationship with the plant roots to make it bioavailable to the plants. So your plants automatically, they photosynthesize and they send sugars out to the roots. They aggregate and the microorganisms feed on those aggregates, and they do an exchange where if a plant needs phosphorus or something like that, the microorganism will send that phosphorus to the plant. And that's so they communicate in a symbiotic relationship like that. But what the Korean natural farming nutrients are going to do is make it bioavailable to where the plant's still working, but it gives it extra energy, stored energy anytime the plant needs it. So if there's a hard condition or say something that comes up to where the plant needs this, it has this stored energy to be able to bioavailable anytime it needs it. So you're having a healthier plant that's able to take up water to last during droughts, cold temperatures, and things like that. You're going to have a healthy, hardier plant, which is going to help produce nutrient-dense crops. The microorganisms help make all the nutrients available for the plant through the rhizosphere and a bioavailable form. So the next product that we have besides your lactic acid bacteria and your IMO collection, now you want to start feeding those microorganisms. Now everybody's used to using your NP and K. Now with Korean natural farming, you kind of stay away from NP and K, and you want to look and feed the microbiology. So there's those 9-7 solutions, those tools basically that Korean natural farming gives you in your toolbox. Okay, the next one is going to be your FFA. Has anybody heard of FFA? This is fermented fish amino acids. So it's fermented fish. I'm going to start passing things around. Now people will probably think that, fermented fish is going to spell putrid and things like that. These are all designed to where you can even use these for human consumption, and they have healing benefits too for yourself. This is also known as fish sauce in Korean food. Okay. But by fermenting the fish, you're going to make all those nutrients that are in the fish, all those omega acids, all those proteins. The proteins are going to be bioavailable. And not only that, but those oils are really good, help fungal growth. So it's going to help with the fungal activity within your soil. Now, when you start seeing these ferments start smelling bad, that's whenever they've gone past their date. But with the Korean natural farming, the FFA, that usually lasts for a long time. It does take 6 months for it to ferment. Okay, now I do have other classes where I talk about how to make all these different solutions. Whenever y'all finish, I have a cap up here. Okay, another one is water-soluble calcium, which is, you're going to have a calcium carbonate source, and I use oyster shells. Right now, I'm letting my eggshells build up. I do save my eggshells in the farm, and that's another thing. Korean natural farming is also closing the loop on your farm to where you don't need a lot of outside sources for your nutrients. It's going to be a closed loop system to where you start pulling off your garden and getting nutrients and things available from your garden to use for your plants. So one thing, if you're raising chickens, you can have eggshells, which is a calcium carbonate source. Now, one of the things that we also use is brown rice vinegar, but the calcium carbonate source is in a not water-soluble form. So with a chemical reaction with the brown rice vinegar, you're going to make a solution that has water-soluble calcium. So with this chemical reaction, you can start seeing the calcium dissolving and it's making calcium acetate, which is a water-soluble calcium source. Okay, these are all going to be diluted in small increments to 1,000 to 1 or 1 to 1,000. So you're using about 5 milliliters per gallon. And so you barely need any of these nutrients. Small amounts go a long way, and you're using them about every 2 weeks. So a small bottle like this will make 48 gallons, but you're only going to be using it every 2 weeks. You can, yes, it's good for a soiler drench, and you can also use it as a foliar spray. It works really great as a foliar spray because it is bioavailable, and it is absorbed through the stomatas, so it's available right away to the plants. So if you have any deficiencies, this is going to help correct the deficiencies right away since it's readily available to the plant. And because, yes, sir. This is water-soluble calcium. Okay, and I do offer classes that go over how to make all the nutrients, and this one is just more of an introduction to all the nutrients. That way you can get familiar with what Korean natural farming products are. Okay, now another one, and this is where you get your plant. You're going to get plants growing off your produce or your garden. This is where you start utilizing the plants that are growing in your garden instead of just cutting them up and putting them in your compost bin. You can start using these clippings, and you want any new growth because the new growth is the ones that have more of the nutrient content in it, more hormones and things like that, more things that are available for your plant. And you're going to ferment it, and it makes a fermented fermented fruit juice. So this is fermenting fruit. Sorry, let me get the plant juice. I got. Okay, I don't have a plant juice. This is fermented fruit juice. So let me go back to the fruits. This is using fruit. So this is going to be high in phosphorus, first of all, and a lot of other ones. So any plant that you're using, you can look up the nutrient content of that plant or fruit, and it's going to provide all those things in a fermented solution. So I use bananas. This is going to be really good in magnesium and potassium. So if you're having deficiencies in magnesium, potassium, you can ferment up some bananas. And not only that, but it's also good for yourself too. So you can even take this in a small tablespoon. Yes, I do ferment all these myself. Yes, and so that's what's good about this Korean natural farming. It's giving the gardener the ability to have all the tools that they need instead of having to go to the garden shop and having to constantly pay. And not only that, but yes, it's regenerative, sustainable. You don't have to worry about packaging, the things that go along with packaging, the gas and transportation for delivering all those things. And not only that, but you're saving money because the only thing you're really using is the cost of sugar and brown rice vinegar. The sugar is going to be the main source that you use for your fermentation. And in the classes that I go over the fermentation, it's usually just equal weight of sugar to plant matter or fruit matter. And the FFA, it was equal weights fish weight to brown sugar. Now you can use different types of sugar. I prefer to use brown sugar because of the molasses helps with it's an enzymatic osmotic pressure. The sugar helps draws out the liquid forms from the plants, and so through osmotic pressure, the brown rice or the brown sugar tends to work best in my opinion. I didn't do a sugar cap so that way it can help with the oxygen. But some people put a brick to help weigh it down. With the FFA, since it's a heavier solids, they tend to weigh themselves down. Now the fish does take up to 6 months because you're wanting to make all the proteins and things like that to break down. Another thing that you add is you add labs to like FFA. I would go over this, of course, in the solutions, but you're going to use lactic acid bacteria to help break down in these fermentations. Yes, you're going to use IMO to help, and then you're also going to use your lactic acid bacteria that would also help with your fermentations. Yeah. Yes, you can use scraps. Some people just want to use the scraps. They don't want to waste the food of the meat, so they just use the scraps. I use whole fish because I do raise my own tilapia, so I use whole fish because you're wanting all the benefits, especially like the guts and all that. There's guts in the digestive system, so you're using those digestive enzymes to help with the fermentation. And that's another thing too, why some people will go to the store and buy their produce, but whenever you go to the store, you got to watch out because all those microorganisms that are on that were naturally on the produce have been washed off. And since it's been at the store, you're basically going to be using organisms from either the grocery store stocker that was putting it up or whoever came by and wanted to see the fruit and they put it back. Yes, well, the bananas I buy, but you want to leave them on the counter to help capture some more organisms again to help with the fermentation. So I would leave it on the counter. You wash them, of course, when you bring them home from the store, and then leave them out for a bit so that way the microorganisms can colonate the fruit again. And that will help with the fermentation. And again, the IMO will help too. And that's what's good about the IMO because you're collecting the diversity of microorganisms within your area. And since they already got adapted to the area there, so they're going to thrive and multiply really well and survive. And that's going to be the key part of Korean natural farming is utilizing the microorganisms that are in your soil to help with the breakdown of nutrients in your plants. Yes. Yes. Okay, so 7 days you're out there, you want to leave your box, and I tend to use more than one box so that way you can make sure you have a good collection. I'll put 7 of them out there, one every day, so that way you can go check on one every day. And you want to make sure you take notes on where your collection is, so that way you know where to go back and look from. Now, they're not always going to be the same when you collect, because it's always going to change. The diversity of microorganisms will change in the climate, temperature, and things like that in the season. So it's always good to use them, different boxes to make sure you get a good collection. When you put your rice in there, of course, you leave it out for 7 days. You put your paper towel as a protection, the root wire to help from animals, shaded area, come back in 7 days, and you're going to see a diversity of colors. You're going to see greens, blues, pinks, and things like that. And that's what you're looking for. So that way, you know, you have a diversity of microorganisms and you have a good collection. If you don't see too many different colors, or as long as you've seen different colors, that's good. Now, if you don't see a diversity of colors, that might not have been a good capture. You can still utilize that. It's just not going to be as potent of a collection. You're wanting to get a good collection, and that's why it's good to do different ones. So that way, if you get out there, you get a good collection, you're going to get that rice, and you're going to pour equal weight to rice and sugar. And that's going to be a ferment. In 7 days, you'll have a liquid solution, which would be IMO2. And I can go over that more in the class and how to make the rice, how soft you want it to go. And once you disturb it, that's it though. Once you open up and check it, that's it. You can't put it back out. So that's why it's good to do it different ones. So that way you make sure that you get a good collection. And from there, you can go all the way up to IMO5, and I go over that in the collection. So one will be a liquid form. Another one will be using the liquid form to inoculate your compost and things like that. So that way you have the microdiversity within the compost already inoculated and growing. We are going to be incorporating, we've been using it at one school at Hidden Cove. I did an application of the FAA, and within 2 weeks, we saw a big difference. I do have photos. I should have brought them. Next time I will be more prepared on that. But you did see the growth it grew 2 times as fast, a lot more green. And it's because these nutrients are bioavailable, so you don't have to worry about nutrient lockup. In fact, it actually helps with nutrient lockup because the microorganisms are breaking down everything that's in your soil. So if you had a lockup through pH, these microorganisms are going to help release that lockup and make it bioavailable. So you're correcting your soil and making it more fertile too. And instead of, like, a lot of people in the gardening things are focusing more on the plant care, we tend to focus more on the soil care because the soil is going to actually, the microorganisms of the soil take care of the plants. If you have healthy soil, you're going to have healthy plants. If you have healthy plants, you're going to have a plant that is it has a better defense against pests, mildew, things like that. So you're going to have a healthier plant with a denser nutrient content too, because these microorganisms are making everything available to the plant. Yeah, and it's there whenever the plant needs it. So say if it needed phosphorus, it'll just send a signal down to the microorganisms and it'll bring. Exactly. So that's why it's giving you the tools to fix whatever you need in the garden. And so you start staying away from fertilizers. In fact, I don't use any fertilizers. All I do is with good compost, laying out your compost and these nutrients, that's all I've been using in my garden, and I've stayed away from bottle nutrients for about 10 years now. And another thing you want to do is utilize soil tests. The best way to know your Korean natural farming is working is soil tests. So you can know what your soil needs, whether it be phosphorus, nitrogen, and potassium. You start knowing what the level is and what it needs. You can start using these tools to utilize that and fix those problems that are in your garden. I've been in the soil I've been gardening for 30 years and I've been in the soil from the beginning. Like I learned, have anybody heard from Malcolm Beck? Has anybody heard of Malcolm Beck? Okay, I learned personally from Malcolm Beck. He was my mentor. I worked next door to him at an organic rose nursery, and I would go pick his brain every day during my lunch breaks. And he's the one that introduced me to microorganisms over 20 years ago. And from there, I've been just learning about microorganisms. And about 10 years ago, they started learning the importance of microorganisms with the Dr. Elaine Ingham. And so she started doing a lot more research on the functions of microorganisms and the benefits and the roles that they play within the soil food web. And so from there, I started learning about Korean natural farming and how it utilizes these tools to help the microorganisms and the diversity of microorganisms in your soil and helping those get populated and have a healthy plants. I mean, it's tremendous to see living organisms. I started looking at it through the microscope and you can start seeing the life start growing. I mean, it starts off with soil, you start seeing barely any life in there, and then they just start multiplying. You start seeing it full of life. I mean, you can actually start seeing your soil move because of how much life's in there. You start seeing fungal growth, mycelium growing throughout your soil and everything like that. It's just wonderful to see healthy plants like that. And any questions that y'all have? Because I know we're wrapping it towards the end of the time. I apologize for me being so nervous. Yeah. I think that's what got me more nervous is trying to stay on the papers. And once I noticed that I do that, that's why I got to put it away. Yeah, this is, I mean, since you're using it at 5 milliliters per gallon, you spray these on, you can even drink a little bit of that. So if you're making it in a clean environment, a lot of these things can be used for your own health, especially like I didn't go over another product of Korean natural farming is oriental herbal nutrients. And so with that uses herbs that have extracted, and it's basically your immune booster for your plants. So it'll help with any kind of disease resistance, mildew resistance, and things like that. So it's kind of like your cough syrup in the cabinet that you can use, or your all natural medicine, elderberry juice. Yeah, whenever you're doing a foliar spray, you want to make sure you cover the bottom leaves and the top leaves, and you just want to saturate the plant and make sure that you get a full coverage of the plant. Whenever you're drenching, it's just like a normal watering where you do your normal watering. You would just incorporate the solutions within your water whenever you're watering. Yes, yes, you can use multiple solutions, and depending on what stage of the growth that you are in your plant is which solution you would use. So you would use more of the fermented fruit juice more towards your flowering stage of the growing, and your fermented plant juice more towards the vegetative stage of your growing. Yes, I do sell these products, and I also offer a class on how to make the products. So that way you don't have to go and purchase them. You'll have the tools you need to make them yourselves at home. Well, that's the whole goal of Korean natural farming is trying to empower the gardener to have these tools. You can contact me on my Instagram on Texas Urban Farmer. You can contact Gardopia, and we're starting to offer the classes through Gardopia. TEXAS, and then it has underscore urban with an HERBAN. Yes, I do raise my own tilapia and I use IBC totes. I start off in like During the winter, I'll buy a lot of little fingerlings and I'll raise them during the winter inside and I'll carry them outside into IBC totes into a bigger system. Any other questions? Yes, they're the big old water bins that basically liquids come in. And so you can even make different aquaponic systems out of there if you want to just use it for a reservoir. I use it to water my whole garden. So it's my reservoir to raise, because you want to use as many microorganisms as you want. So I use aquatic microorganisms, which is what you would get from the water solution, along with the benefits from the fish waste and things like that. So the more microorganisms you can add to your soil system, the better. And so you have anaerobic and aerobic microorganisms, but you're wanting to look for the facilitated anaerobic microorganisms because those can thrive in anaerobic conditions and aerobic conditions. And they'll actually thrive better in aerobic conditions. Lactic acid bacteria is a facultative anaerobe or labs. So it can thrive in non-oxygenated areas, but it will thrive better in oxygenated solution. All right, thank y'all for coming out.
Fruit trees downstairs.